Hello learners, Namaskar. I am Pragya, welcoming you in your YouTube channel English Seeker. Today we will discuss about the second poem of the book Flamingo, and that's title is Keeping Quiet. So this poem is composed by the poet Pablo Neruda. The very first we will see a little bit about the poet, then we will see the explanation of the poem. In the next video we will discuss about the key points of poem and poetic devices. So let's start. The very first we will discuss about the poet. So Pablo Neruda. And the very first you should know that Pablo Neruda is his pen name. So what is his real name? His real name is Ricardo Eliezer Naftali Reyes Basalto, who was born on 12th July 1904 and died on 23rd September 1973, and he was a Chilean poet, diplomat and politician who won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1971. Neruda became known as a poet when he was 13 years old and wrote in a variety of styles including surrealistic poems, historical epics, politician manifestos, a prose autobiography, and passionate love poems such as the ones in his collection 20 love poems and a song of despair, which was published in 1924. If you want other information, so it is given in NCERT, you can read from there. Now we will discuss about the explanation of the poem. So let's see the explanation. So the very first lines are, now we will count to 12 and we will all keep still. For once on the face of the earth, let's not speak in any language. It's stop for 1 second and not move our arms so much. The poet urges, it means the poet urges each one of us to count up to 12 and then be quiet. The poet might have used the phrase count to 12 as there are 12 hours represented on a clock or 12 months in a year. He might have wanted the people to keep still as long as they could. He wanted a moment of silence on the earth when no language is spoken. In this way, there will be no miscommunication between people and no harsh words will be spoken. In this moment of silence, the poet doesn't want anyone to move their arms. The next lines are, the second stanza is, it would be an exotic moment. Without rush, without engines, we would all be together in a sudden strangeness. So in this stanza, the poet feels that such a moment of silence would be an unusual and exciting one. It will have miraculous consequences. There will be no hurry or the sound of the machines to pollute the atmosphere. It will be a strange and unfamiliar moment with stillness all around. In this unusual period, the bonds of humanity will get stronger. The third stanza is, fishermen in the cold sea would not harm whales, and the man gathering salt would not at his hurt hands. So in these lines, in this moment, the poet says that in this moment of inactivity, the fishermen would not be catching fish. Hence, the whales in the sea will be safe. This idea is suggestive of the thought that human beings would not destroy nature. The man who gathers salt will be able to tend to his bounded hands, for which he had no time earlier. Thus, both nature and humans will be able to recover from their bounds. Yes, now we will see the fourth stanza. And what is the fourth stanza? Those who prepare green wars with gas, wars with fire, victory with no survivors, would put on clean clothes and walk about with their brothers in the shade doing nothing. So in this stanza, the poet now speaks of those who wage wars against humanity or environment. Wars of all kinds, including the use of chemicals or poisonous gases, war that bring death and destruction, wars that leave none to celebrate victory. He says that such men should stop their activity, shed their clothes stained with the blood of humanity, put on new clothes and walk with their brothers. The poet implies that the war tone would the war tone word should be replaced by one with an atmosphere of peace, brotherhood, and harmony. The next stanza is when I want should not be confused without total inactivity. Life is what it is about. I want no truck with death. So, in these lines, the poet makes a clarification that though he is advocating the need for silence, his advice should not be confused with totally inactivity. He does not want any association with death. He says that life is meant to be lived. In the next stanza, the poet says that if we were not so single minded about keeping our lives moving and for once could do nothing, perhaps a huge silence might interrupt this sadness of never understanding ourselves and of threatening ourselves with death. So, in this stanza, the poet further advises that people should stop being self centered and selfish. For one moment, they should not think of keeping their lives moving, meeting their ends, or fulfilling their duties. That huge silence which will arise from such a movement will only serve to help the people. It will help them introspect and overcome their sadness of failing to understand themselves. People have been threatening themselves with death by their activities. This moment of silence will give them time to understand themselves better. The last stanza is perhaps the earth can teach us as when everything seems dead and later proves to be alive. Now I'll count up to 12 and you keep quiet and I will go. So in the last stanza, the poet feels that the earth can enlighten us and guide us in this process of keeping quiet. He wants us to observe that there is some activity under apparent stillness. For instance, a seed appears to be dead, but huge fruit bearing trees are born from such seeds laying dead here and there. Finally, the poet thinks that he has said what he intended to. Now he wants us to keep quiet while he is counting to 12, after which he will leave. So this was the explanation of the poem stanza by stanza. I personally want to suggest you that the very first, this is my favorite poem. The second is that this poem is most important just in the perception of board examinations too. So you should listen this video, you should see this video twice or thrice or how many times if you wish to understand it much more clear. I can explain this in Hindi too if you wish. So please write in comment box. If you are not going to write, then I am not intended to do so, just because it is my thinking that in examination you have to note down everything in English, so it will be very useful for you to understand the poem in English. When you will be capable to understand it in English, then definitely you will be capable to answer all type of questions in your examination. So with this, I just want to conclude this video. In the next video, I will tell you the key points, the theme of this poem, and the poetic devices used in this poem. Thank you.